Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. In today's video I'm going to be questioning whether the Manticore was truly as bad as I thought it was going to be when it first went into the game. Now I've had some time to play now, probably about 70 games or so in this vehicle. And much to my surprise, I'm actually kind of getting one of the better win ratios on any of my tier 10 light tanks. My mind is blown. When I saw the Manticore first go into the game, of course Wargaming did buff it a little bit with regards to the amount of ammunition it carried and some minor other buffs around there. But when I first thought this tank was going to go into the game, I thought it was going to be an absolute disaster. I thought it was going to be horrific, useless. And while I probably wouldn't take this thing into a Clan Wars environment, and I definitely wouldn't want to take it into a ranked battles game, although I'm sure that you can still do pretty darn well in a ranked battles game, you're still just not going to do as well as something like an EBR 105 you're going to do in a T100 LT. But inside the random queue of World of Tanks, the positions that I've been able to take this vehicle, and the kind of damage support that I've been able to achieve has led to me winning 2/3 of my games solo at tier 10 in a Manticore. And it very much surprises me. Now of course, I could just be getting lucky over the 70 or so games that I've played, and maybe it's all going to start to even out now. But when you start to reach about 50, 60, 100 games of World of Tanks in a vehicle, you can start to really get an idea of what the win ratio of the vehicle is. And obviously it depends on how well you're playing, but I honestly think that the Manticore, if it's played well and you account for the weaknesses of the vehicle, is not actually as bad as I once thought it was going to be. Now there are two things that I absolutely despise about this vehicle. One, the amount of ammunition that it can carry. Two, as you saw there, the gun elevation. And that is that the gun elevation on this tank is an awful 8 degrees. It's because of the fact that the turret at the back, you can see it touches the hull as we're trying to elevate our gun off this slope. And so you often have to do these awkward micro maneuvers where you actually put yourself on level ground to be able to aim up at opponents who are just barely above you. But once you've got used to the gun depression, and once you've got used to the amount of ammunition that you can carry, and you've accepted that this tank can be a very expensive vehicle to play because you often run out of regular rounds and will have to fire premium rounds, and that you can't take all of the HESH ammunition that you would want in a vehicle like this, yeah, it's actually pretty solid. This 105mm, while it's nothing really to write home about like all of the tier 10 tank destroyer guns, at least it's got 248mm of penetration on its standard rounds and 268 on its premium rounds. So instantly a big step up over something like the T100 LT. And while the damage per minute on this vehicle is absolutely horrific at 1,671 base, there's literally other tier 10 tanks that will do twice as much damage as this vehicle. It's absolutely crazy when we think about things like that. But with the alpha damage of the vehicle, 390, it definitely helps to level the playing field a little bit. You don't want to get all in by a T100 LT, let me tell you, and that's why I'm pulling back here, because I was worried that he was going to all in me, I was worried he was going to rush me. You have to just always try and keep at a decent distance to your opponents. You want to end up in the sweet spot in this vehicle. And I have to admit, it's definitely helped that I've now got an incredibly good crew on this tank. Definitely one of the most pressured vehicles in the game with regards to its crew loadout, as there are only 2 crew members, and because there are only 2 crew members, your commander has a huge amount of pressure to try and get 6 skills, 8 skills, even more to be able to achieve all of the skills that you would take for granted on other light tanks once you've got up to about the 4 or 5 mark across the crew. So I've actually put the, what I'm going to call a Santa's Little Helper, something Winfield, I believe, which came from Wargaming's loot boxes this year. And also, if you logged in, I believe over Christmas, and I think if you still log in now, you can actually get a Santa Claus completely for free outside of the loot boxes, which is actually a really nice thing for Wargaming to give us. And I would actually go and say that the best vehicle to put your 00 skill crews in are going to be the Manticore. I can't think of a better vehicle to put them in. Unless you absolutely love the ELC AMX at tier 5, and I don't think that many people are playing that tank, and I'm not even sure if Sundobu Jjigae, the famous, I think, Korean who was playing that vehicle 10,000 times, who I featured on the YouTube channel a few times as he was uploading on the old QuickyBaby replay website, which is now no longer around. So Sundobu Jjigae might not even be playing that vehicle now, but if he was, I think he'd probably put his 00 skill crew in, but he's probably already got all of the skills anyway, right? Anyway, let me focus up. So what I'm trying to say is that now that I've given the Manticore a go, now that I've really tried to deal with its drawbacks of ammunition and its gun elevation and its damage per minute, I've really found that it's a great mix of camo rating, alpha damage, and more importantly, just enough mobility. It's definitely not the fastest of light tanks, but this thing has got some incredible camo rating. I actually use a concealment directive on this tank now that I believe that they're available for credits, or frankly just because I've saved up so many. That's an absolute disaster. I got hit for 748 by a regular high explosive round from an FV4005. I don't even think that hit my tank directly. I think it splashed right near the tracks, nearly decimating my vehicle, and that completely changes the way that we're going to be able to take down this game. Alright, so now I've told you about why I'm enjoying the Manticore, this great mix of concealment, mobility, and a bit of alpha damage. Let me talk about what the plan is in this round. So, when I'm playing all of my light tanks, and none more so than the Manticore, it's all about creating a duel against the enemy light tank and the faster enemy medium tanks in the battle, because you want to be able to account for where all of the enemies are. You want to try and add up the number of dots on the mini-map, see how many vehicles are left alive. The best way to see how many vehicles are left alive is to use the numbers at the top center of your screen. And obviously, if your team has got 6 kills, then there's going to be 9 tanks left on the enemy team, right? And then you'd want to try and put together where you think the enemy tanks are. And that means that vehicles like the 121 here just can't sneak up on me. And that allows you, on maps like this, big open maps, to be able to get dominant vision against your opponents. And then it's all about using Sixth Sense. You know, see, I fired at the 121, but I was ready to run away. But when I saw my Sixth Sense didn't go off, that means that we're feeling pretty good about shooting this 121 again. And now that I've seen that he's actually gone outside the 445 meters maximum spotting distance, then that means that I can continue to harass him, because I know that he's not going to have spotted me there. Now, I saw the FV405, managed to light up the griller, or maybe the IS-7 actually lit up the griller there. Now, what I want to do is I want to use these rings on the map, and what often you'll see me do is make sure that I'm driving almost in a circle near the FV405. Do you see how I go close to the FV405, but not too close to the FV405? It's possibly one of the most important things you can ever learn in your light tanks, boys and girls. That is to use the rings on your mini-map to know your view range, to know roughly, you don't have to know the exact amount, but a rough amount of what the camo rating of the enemy vehicles will be, and then put yourself close enough so you're going to spot, but also keep in mind of the chances that you're going to get spotted. So I know that the FV405 has got probably about 2% camo, and my tank has got 500 meters view range. That means I will spot him at 445 meters if irrelevant. If he's sitting still, if he's moving, if he's firing, it doesn't matter. So what I wanted to do in that situation was get as close as I can, but you know, it didn't probably need to even get that close in retrospect. I probably got a little bit too close and I risked the 405 spotting me. Obviously this is a terrifying scenario for this tank. Big alpha damage from the E4, but more importantly having a TVP above you. The TVP can fully unload in the space that it takes you to reload a single shell in this tank. It's absolutely crazy. So we fire one blind there into the T124. We won't know whether we hit him until he's got spotted again. But anyway, let me focus once again. And it looks like we did hit him actually, as his hit points are now down to 110. Unless somebody else hit him. So I really want to stress just how important it is to have an idea of the enemy's view range. Know what your camo rating is. For the Manticore, it's about 40%. Most tanks at tier 10, if they're using coated optics and have exceptionally skilled crews, have got about 500 meters view range. That means they're not going to spot you until 300 meters. However, medium tanks have usually only got about 25 or 30% camo while moving. And if you have 500 meters view range, that means that you're either going to see them at 400 meters or all the way down to about 350 meters. And that is your sweet spot. You have to live in that 300 to 400 meters range in your Manticore and also in your other light tanks, but again, none more so than the Manticore. And if you can do that, you're going to be able to spot your opponents, you're going to be able to harass them, and then it doesn't really matter about your damage per minute. Sure, it can chip up, and 3,500 doesn't feel like the largest amount to have done in the space of a near 10-minute game. But it's all about the amount of vision that we've put out this round, and we're up to 6,000 assistance damage so far. And really, the Manticore relies on its allies more than probably any other tier 10 tank that I can think of. Of course, any vehicle that has the lowest damage per minute is going to rely on its allies. But just a clutch shot there into the tracks manages to cement us another 1,500 tracking, and the Manticore manages to stay alive through to the end of the battle in a cracking round of World of Tanks. So no battle heroes for this round, but an ace tanker for the 1,267 base experience, and when we add up the combined damage and assistance here, it's over 11,000. In fact, despite our vehicle having the lowest damage per minute at tier 10, we were also able to do more damage than the rest of our allies. Again, when we take into account that assistance, the impact that we had on this game was clearly the deciding factor. We hunted the enemy light tank. We prevented them from having a rather large role in the game, although they were still able to do 3,700 assistance. We locked them down, we shut them down, and then once you've got rid of all of the light vehicles, it really is your opportunity to outspot all of the remaining tanks. And so that's what I've really been focusing on with this vehicle and with a lot of my other light tanks recently. That sometimes it's not right to make the overly aggressive play. You definitely want to get stuck in, but you don't want to get into a position where you're ever going to be all-in by your opponents. Wait for the light tanks to make mistakes, or if you see that they're actually winning the game with your aggression, you're going to have to address that and do something about it to try and shut them down. Now, I must stress, for every round like this, where I've really been able to make the difference inside the battle, I can't tell you how frustrating it is to play this tank when you get rushed by a T100 LT or you get rushed by an EBR 105 on the enemy team, and there's pretty much nothing that you can do about it. This tank is really not for the faint of heart. It is definitely a hard mode vehicle, but for some reason, possibly because I've been trying harder in this tank than any of my other light vehicles, I've been having a more significant impact, which makes me think about the Manticore and whether I was wrong to say that the entirety of the British light tank tree sucks. Yeah, I think they do suck when you compare them to some of the best light tanks in the game. And that doesn't mean that if you don't put your time and your effort and you think about your plays in your British light tanks, you can't still be impactful inside your battles. And I just think that the Manticore, I think it's doing well enough against the Rheinmetall Panzerwagens. I think it's doing well enough against the WZ-1321s and the Sheridans that it's making up for those battles where it probably gets overpowered by a T100 LT or just outspotted by an EBR 105. So would I thoroughly recommend the Manticore for all light tank lovers out there? No, I really wouldn't. However, if you're a player who's a bit long in the tooth and you're looking for something where you're definitely not going to have any advantages against your opponents, but still a bit of a funky tank that can feel like an underdog and nobody really expects it to do well, and so sometimes they can thoroughly underestimate it, then maybe this will be the tank for you. And so that's it for today, ladies and gents. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what your favorite vehicles in the game are that you feel are underrated. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.